Good evening, good evening, good evening, KO family, good evening, guests and friends. Please do me a favor and let me know if you guys can hear me. That would be great. Let me know if you guys can hear me. Good evening, everyone. Just let me know if you guys can hear me. We are going to be doing walking through the Bible. And today we are on 1 Samuel 18 to 20, as well as Psalms 11 and 59. Let me know if you guys can hear me. Oh, Prophetess Kalila, thank you. I'm blushing. Look, good evening. Okay, good. So I'm not going to be before you guys long. I know we have to get ready to get on for midnight prayer, which I'm so excited about. So I'm just going to share really quick some of the things that the Lord highlighted in studying 1 Samuel 18 to 20, as well as Psalm 11 and 59. So as we know, 1 Samuel 18 starts out with just talking about Jonathan and David's their relationship in a sense, and their friendship and their bond, and how much they bonded and loved each other. Then it goes on to talk about we hear that Saul had put David in command to fight, which pleased the people. And David was successful in everything that Saul sent him to do. So we see that David is now in command. He's doing everything that he's supposed to do, and he's very successful at everything he puts his hand to do, which we know when we're operating in the power of God, that everything we put our hands to do will be successful and prosperous. But then we hear about verse 6, which is really interesting, which some of us have heard before, but it talks about how the people loved David, and they began to sing praises about David, and began to sing about Saul killed his thousands, David tens of thousands, like beginning to do that. And even in doing that, how it made King Saul upset. And it talks about how from that day forward, he watched David jealously and envious. So he allowed envy and jealousy to start to sink in. One of the things we have to be careful about is making sure we don't allow people and what they say, whether they're praising you, whether they're not, whatever they're saying, but we have to not allow things that people say to determine what we do and how we do for God, or forsake our position because of what people say. Because people can say good things, some people might say bad things, but our most important thing is always making sure that we are, no matter what, in line with what God is saying and with what God is doing. So that's the most important things, because when we're in line with what God is saying, God is going to bless us no matter what people say, whether it's positive, whether it's negative. So we have to just be making sure we're more concerned about what God is saying more so than what people are saying. Because even when we're more concerned about what God is saying, it will allow us to be concerned and, to give ear, because we should, of course, care, with how we're portraying God in everything that we're doing. When we think about character and just having the fruits of the Spirit and things of that nature, of course, we have to be mindful of that. But as far as people swaying you of how you feel and where you are, that's what we have to make sure we're careful with doing, and not becoming envious or jealous of anybody else in their space, which we know, especially nowadays with social media, it's easy for people to see what other people are portraying. We don't know really what's going on behind the scenes, but what they're portraying, and start, building that competition or that envy or that jealousy inside. So it's so important that we don't even allow those little seeds to come. What's interesting about it is the fact that even the Bible talks about how Jonathan wasn't even like, Jonathan was so sold out to what God wanted and how God wanted to do it. He wasn't even any type of upset or anything about if David did become king. But Saul, on the other hand, because he didn't have the right motives and heart, and because he wasn't after God's own heart at this particular moment, he became jealous and envious, compared to Jonathan was just like, whatever God says. And that's the kind of attitude we have to say, okay, Lord, it's not about me. It's not about my position. It's not about where you put me. It's about what you said. And what you say is what matters. If somebody else goes, it doesn't matter. What we have to do is just do what we have to do that God told us to do and where he placed us, and be confident in that. So I loved that, just that part, because Jonathan could have easily been upset about it too, but he didn't. He was just like, if this is God's will, then I'm good with that, so we wish Saul would have felt the same way. Okay. So something that was interesting to me, I'm not sure if anybody else ever thought about it, but I always ask questions, of course, when I'm reading. So I'm like, why did this evil spirit keep coming? Or why was the evil spirit sent to torment Saul, outside of the fact that, of course, David was playing, but still, like, why was God allowing this evil spirit to be sent? And one of the things that the Lord highlighted, I would say, to me, is the fact of how Saul actually allowed jealousy and envy, that seed, actually to be planted, which opened him up to more of an evil spirit, or opened him up to something different. And I also think that it was a test as well, to see how Saul was going to handle it, like what he was going to do with that. Hey, Natasha. Hey, Pastor Frankie. Hey, Tamika. Hey, Tanya, Kathy. Good evening. To see how he was going to handle it, as far as just trying to see, okay, are you going to overcome this? Or are you going to give into this? Because it's easy. And that's a lot of times, even with us, when certain situations happen, are we going to just say, okay, Lord, you're in control, I'm going to overcome this? Or are we going to give into whatever that spirit is? Because a lot of times there are seeds that's planted that sometimes we don't even recognize or even notice that's there. And it allows us to be open to even different things and greater things to attack us and to dwell as well. So we have to be very careful, and just, when things happen, like my mom always says, that when things happen, nip it in the bud. So from the root, oh no, I'm not going to allow this to happen, but begin to immediately deal with whatever that seed is, so that it doesn't grow, and so that it doesn't allow other things to come in. Just like when you think about fruit, for instance, when we have fruit in the refrigerator and you have one grape that has like some mold on or anything like that, you can take that piece of fruit out, right? And if you take that piece of fruit out, the other around it won't mold as much. But if you allow that mold to stay there, then the mold has room to grow. So it's just like anything else. If we allow certain things to stay in our spirit, or certain seeds of envy, of jealousy, of gossip, whatever it may be, then it allows room for negative growth, which is horrible. And it doesn't allow us to fully be free in what God is telling us to do. So that was one of the things that God pointed out just in chapter 18. So chapter 19, we see that Saul is still trying to do things to kill David, because he's afraid of David, because he knows that God is with David and no longer with him. Okay. So Saul then orders Jonathan and his servants to kill David. Jonathan then, at that moment, something that was highlighted was Jonathan became an intercessor for David and talking to his father. And it actually restored David back to his rightful place, and he began to serve again underneath the king. But then again, an evil spirit is sent, and he tries to kill David, and David flees. Okay, in chapter 20, we get into Jonathan protecting, or trying to protect David. I'm sorry, text is coming at the same time. And then in Psalms 11, one of the things that stood out was just the fact of Psalms 11. Let me actually say some of it in case you guys didn't have a chance to read it. It was kind of short chapter. But even when we look at verse 1, and it says, "In the Lord put I my trust. How say ye to my soul, flee as a bird to your mountain?" So we see here David saying he's going to trust in the Lord. What can I do? Should I just flee and not trust God? So even in his stance, when he's coming before God, it's like, okay, I'm going to trust you. Even though this is happening, I'm still going to trust in what you're saying. I'm going to trust in your word, because you know everything. Even with the enemy coming at me, he even as we continue to read, it begins to talk about God and God seeing all. and that he tries the righteous, but the wicked he hated. So God will have vengeance. So he begins to look at God. I'm going to trust in you because I know you're going to handle that. And that's how we have to be all the time with God. A lot of times things will happen, darts will come, arrows will come, but we have to say, you know what, Lord, even even through these arrows coming, I'm still going to trust you, even with different things, when we have different things happen with people, and we want to we want to be the ones that bring vengeance, but we have to allow God to bring vengeance and just allow it to stay in his hands. When people do us wrong, when different things happen, we have to just put our trust in God and say, okay, Lord, I'm not going to worry about it. I'm not going to try to do what I feel like doing, because truth be told, I mean, I can attest to that. Truth be told, sometimes you feel like your flesh rises up and it's like, wait, they did what? So we have to just make sure we're in a posture where it's like, okay, they did that. Yes, we might be upset for a minute, but you know what, God, you have the final say. You see everything. God knows everything that's going on. He sees everything that's going on. So we have to just put our trust in God and know that he's going to handle it the way he needs to handle it and in his time, which is the hard part, right? Sometimes we want it to happen right away, but God is saying, no, in my time, I will do it. And we have to be conscious and allow God to do things and allow vengeance to happen in its time. So then we're going to jump over to Psalms 59. Okay. And Psalm 59 actually starts with David praying that God delivers him from his enemy. He talks about Saul trying to kill him and people waiting on him so that he can die. He prays that God will rise up and help him. So he's praying that God will help him. He knows that people are waiting and trying to kill him. So as he's running, he's praying that God will protect him and that God will help him. Then he talks about, in verse 8, he talks about all that they are doing, but then he begins to declare who God is. And basically, it's nothing to God. So he declares, even with all of this going, they're doing this, they're trying to kill me, they're shooting arrows. He declares everything that they're doing, but he said, but you are the one who can deliver. You are the one who can set free. So he begins to talk about God being his defense and how God will protect him. And a lot of times that's what we have to do. And I love it because as he begins to talk about, even though all these things are happening and he knows it and he says it, he still begins to say, but God, you are my defense. You are my shield. So he begins to declare the very essence of who God is, knowing that if I have a relationship with you, if I put my trust in you, there's no way you're going to fail. You see everything that's happening. And he ends it with a praise. So he begins to talk about, in the next few verses, he said, let them do what they want to do. But as for me, I'm going to sing. I'm going to rejoice. I'm going to praise God, even in the midst of them trying to kill me, in the midst of them trying to destroy me. I don't know how many people can attest to that, but there's been plenty of times where things have been happening. And I'm like, you know what, Lord, I'm not even going to allow that to happen. And I will just begin praising God out of nowhere and just beginning to lift up the name of God, because it just does something to you when you begin, even in the face of the enemy, when attacks are coming and you just begin to lift up the name of the Lord. It allows your mind to come to a different place in God. It allows you not to even think about what's going on, but just to begin to think of how great God is, how many times he's brought you out before, how he will never leave us or forsake us, how much he loves us, how much we can cast our cares upon him. All things that we can do through Christ who strengthens us. We just begin to praise God and rejoice in who God is and not what's going on around us, but actually begin to rejoice in the God that we serve, because we know the God that we serve, he allows us to be victorious. He allows us to be more than conquerors. So we begin to just bless the name of the Lord. And I love that, because it's easy to just say, okay, they're doing this, they're doing that. But he ends with a praise. He says, yet still will I rejoice in you. Though all of this is going on, I'm still going to trust in you. I'm still going to rejoice in you. I'm still going to praise your name, because you are able to do abundantly above all that we can ask or think. So I pray I pray that this has blessed. I pray that this has helped. I pray when the enemy tries to come and tries to bring distractions around you, that you begin to open up your mouth, use your weapon, and begin to tear down the walls and the weapons that are trying to come at you by praising God, knowing that he has all power and knowing that he is your defense. He is your shield. He will do what he needs to do because he sees all and he knows all. I love you all. I will see you guys soon in prayer. I pray even now, before we get prayer, get prayer started in your living room, in your house, wherever you are. Just begin to lift up the name of the Lord because he is so great, because he's mighty, and because he is with us. I love you all, and I will talk to you guys later.